Okay, it's a few minutes before 7:30, but we're going to go ahead and go live now. Um Hopefully my sound's a little better than usual. I'm going to try a headset this time. The drink of choice is going to be that same whiskey that I always forget the name of, and ginger cranberry ginger ale. Give everyone a minute to show up. Hmm, that's pretty good. All right, let's go ahead and share this a few places while we're waiting. Okay, we're just getting ready here. I'm just sharing it to a few places before we get started. Give me just a moment here. Hopefully, the sound is better than before since I got the headset on. Hey, Ricky. Hope the sound is better than normal. Like I said, we're just sharing it to a few groups here. Let's see, where else we want to put it. Put it in. Ah, there we are. Go ahead and play the flute for a bit. Give everybody a minute to show up. Oh, I'm off. I just want to check something real quick. Okay, yep. That's where it's supposed to be. Okay, let's go ahead and share it a few more places. Let's see, where else do we want to put it? We're going to be talking about the law of aesthetics tonight and the correlation between that and thou shalt groove, which is an earlier video I did about the one law of the universe, and that is thou shalt groove and the law of aesthetics. Good evening, Romstead. Glad to see you. We're going to give everybody just a little bit more time to show up, see who else wants to get in on this. Let's have them play the flute for just a little bit longer, I think. Okay. So, hi, Felix. Good to see you. We're just waiting for a few more people to show up so we can get started here. Like I said, we are going to be talking about the law of aesthetics and thou shalt groove, which is another way of phrasing the law of aesthetics. Normally, we phrase this law of aesthetics as uh, life is an art form that takes place between life and death, or living is an art form that takes place between life and death. And that is more of the philosophical ramifications of the law of aesthetics. While thou shalt groove is more stating it as an actual law, and that it is something that we do have to adhere to. We have to follow the patterns of life. We have to adapt to what is around us in order to survive. Therefore, thou shalt groove is a self enforcing law, and it is the only actual law of the universe. But we're going to wait for people to show up a little bit more before we get into that. Give them just a few more minutes here. Let's see. Maybe share this a few more places. Let's see. No. Okay, I was giving people a little more time to show up. Maybe everybody's at the King's protest today, huh? It is quite exciting. The No King's protests today. Supposed to be the biggest one yet. They're they're predicting a lot of people to be there tonight. Hopefully, those of us that haven't made it online tonight, that's where they are, is at the protest. That would be great. Um, that's probably where I would be myself were I in the States tonight. Okay, well, huh. So we'll give everybody a little more time to show up. It is a big night tonight, I suppose. We are going to be talking about the law of aesthetics, thou shalt groove. Okay, so sorry about that. As I said a little while ago, the law of aesthetics is typically stated as living is an art form that takes place between life and death. The important bit behind the law of aesthetics is that all things tend to follow patterns. There is an aesthetic style to the way things proceed, and there is a poetry to existence that is reflected throughout these patterns. And this isn't only some beautiful, inspirational thing. This isn't an empty idea of, oh, there's beauty in the universe, but because there is. That is where the power comes from, is that beauty of the universe. That is how we begin to understand the patterns. We have to be immersed with the patterns and understand that their movement so that we can groove, so that we can adapt, so that we can flow within those patterns and see where the poetry flows and our place in it. As I said in the last episode, I am encouraging everyone to have a more artistic existence. That is the key to power. That is the key to becoming one with oneself and even how you remember past lives going forward is create beautiful moments, create moments worth remembering. And those are the things that will shine through. Those are the things that draw the attention of the fuller self, is them beautiful moments, that artistry of living. That is what draws us to ourselves. That is what creates purpose. Yeah. Because as I said before about the audience, the people that are watching us from outside of the now, the all thing, when we are all perceiving all things, that is actually the core of existence, because existence is created through perception. And this perception is taking place outside of the now. And the moments that are most interesting are those that are most deeply perceived. So if we lead artistic and beautiful lives, we draw the attention of our fuller self to us, and that produces more poetry, more flow, more synchronicity to our existence. And the way that we do that is simply by being more artistic in the way we exist, by interacting with the patterns around us. And that is why the law of aesthetics is. It is a simple fact of reality, because because we are drawn to cohesion. We are drawn to patterns, and therefore, because reality is created through perception, patterns are drawn throughout the system, because that's what draws our attention. Yeah. As I said, the law of aesthetic states living is an art form that takes place between life and death. And it is within that we find the beauty of existence. But the art form itself takes place even beyond living, as we proceed through each motion of the life, death, rebirth cycle. There is a poetry, a artistry to the way things move. And that's what creates the patterns. That's why things move in circles and spirals and patterns, is because it's repeating itself. Just like I'm kind of repeating myself now as I struggle to fully um articulate what it is that I mean with this. This is the reason and purpose for there being existence. This is why we are, because we are perceiving. I've talked before about how perception, um oh my god, my goodness. Do I think tragedy also plays a part in beauty? Absolutely. Absolutely. Um I have never really the answer to that has never really sat well with me, because I've actually asked this question. And it's the truth. This is the only answer possible, but it doesn't sit well with me in some ways. Is that when I ask, why do good things happen to bad people? It's because the world would be less interesting if they didn't. And that seems odd. It seems cold, but it's a part of how things are. The things have to be interesting. There has to be something for us to perceive. The audience must be entertained in that those that are doing the perceiving outside of the now need to have something to look at that is worth perceiving, something that maintains their interest and continues the flow of existence. Now, I'm not saying that if we all get bored in the eternal now, that existence is going to stop existing, but it will be less. The less interesting it becomes, the lesser it becomes. Now, in an infinite reality, of course, there's always other places to look, there's always things to perceive, but we want to keep our reality as interesting as possible so we can maintain that free will. And I feel once again like I'm struggling to articulate what I mean. Let me let's start from the beginning one more time. Living is an art form that takes place between life and death. And what that means is that per- life itself flows in patterns. It has, for lack of a word, an aesthetic style to which, in the way which things turn. And because of this, we can find beauty everywhere. But it isn't just the beauty, it's literally that repetition of patterns. This is how the law of repetition itself even works. Every time a pattern is repeated, the momentum of its cycle increases. That is that same idea. The pattern picks up, and the more we perceive a pattern, the more we see it, the stronger the tendency for that pattern to exist becomes. And that is essentially how spellcraft itself even works, is by influencing those patterns, putting special emphasis on certain momentums within the pattern by using sigil work, metaphors, symbolism, whatever it is that we use. That's how it works, is by putting momentum within different positionings within the pattern. I have a video early on where I talk about positioning and momentum in relation to spellcraft. And that's a very important aspect of what it is that we are talking about here. Because it is the understanding of those patterns that allows us to alter them, that allows us to adapt. That gets us to that second bit, the thou shalt groove, which is the self enforcing part of the law of aesthetics, where it becomes less a scientific law and simply, literally, the law, because you have to adapt. You have to move to the patterns. You have to react to that as around what is around you. You have to groove. Find your way to groove with the reality around you, or you will cease to continue to exist in that form. And that is what causes thou shalt groove to be a self enforcing law. This is the one actual law of the universe, is that, well, you have to adapt or you will pay consequences for that. You have to change with the changing of reality. You have to find ways to move within it, to interact with it. And the better you do that, the better your life is. The better your existence is, the more you're able to enact your own will upon your existence. And the less you are able to groove, the less you are able to find your sense of understanding the pattern and how it moves, well, the more you are going to be controlled by what is around you rather than controlling what is around you. Therefore, you are achieving less free will and less control over your fate. less ability to sow your fate, which is what we are aiming for as sorcerers. Absolutely, yes. Do I believe that a spell has more potential for success if the outcome aimed for will be poetic? Yes. This is a very powerful tool. When we have that artistry behind us, it becomes interesting. It becomes something that the audience is paying attention to, and that adds strength to it, but also it gives it momentum when it works within the pattern of how things are moved, how the collective consciousness would like to see it. Yeah. That's kind of going back to the idea of the audience. But the closer that you are to that sense of poetic justice, that sense of things just should turn out that way, the more powerful you can put momentum into it. But also, the more likely an outcome is, because the patterns are moving that way, the easier it is to nudge things with spellcraft. It's much easier to direct a wheel that is already in motion than it is to reverse the motion of a wheel that has already begun to turn. So it is a matter of poetic justice and beauty, but it's also a matter of practicality. And those two things kind of mesh mesh with each other as reality forms. The No King's protest has a kind of poetic irony in its context. I mean, it does. And it's interesting in that there's actually some that's an interesting point there, because we have patterns around Americans know that kings are bad. And even with his own people, like with his own base, they got upset when they heard a pattern that they recognized, the word king. They remembered that kings are bad. And even though they don't see the other parts of that, that word was something that they recognized within the pattern, and it upset everybody when he called himself king and and that's what part of what spawned these no king protests, is when Trump called himself a king. And yeah, the that hit the momentum, that hit right on the pattern and pushed him to well, it pushed them to see, at least for a moment, that there was something not good. It peeled off a bunch of people because they recognized that portion of the pattern, that king means someone who is un-American. Yeah, that's it's a pretty low bar right there. But that's how that panned out. That's how the psychology of this whole things works, is to find the moments, the keys to how the momentum of a person's mind works, but on a larger level. I got a little off track there. I don't know. There is some irony in that, the fact America has to do a No Kings protest, but it's also a repeating of that pattern. Yeah. Is that better? Am I back? It looks like I'm back. Can you hear me now? It's back. No, yeah. Oh, it's back now. Okay, you just missed the W. Okay. Um. So where were we? Yes. We've completed this cycle. That's actually a great example. We've completed this cycle where we rejected a king, said no taxation without representation. We pushed forward with that. We had a revolution, and then we've gone through all the same cycles of putting more and more power, concentrating more and more power into a single person until we get to the point that if we have a president that if they want to just uh, forego precedent and popular opinion, can essentially make themselves a king. And so now here we are again, resisting that idea. We are all the way back to no kings. We are all the way back to trying to get rid of a king. They adulate him too. Indeed, they do. They there is more worship with the with Trump than I mean, it's mind blowing. This whole idea that it's a cult. Yeah, I mean, it is a cult. There's a lot of occult stuff going on with what he's been doing. That this is true as well. But especially now that we've gotten to the Middle East and found that he's telling them people over in Israel, he's telling the people that are attacking Iran that Trump has been anointed by God to bring about the end of the world. So, I mean, we can no longer claim it's not a cult. These people are, it's literally become a doomsday cult. There's people saying, oh, he's here to bring about the end of the world. That's pretty insane. But we're getting very far off a topic. And I'm not sure that I want to continue on that path for the moment. Um, except for that, I'm assuming that's where everybody is tonight. Like, we've had a few people pop in, but this is haven't been many people on at all. A few people pop in here and there. It's mostly just been some of my most diehard subscribers here with us tonight, and I appreciate you being here. Hopefully, the rest of them are off at the No Kings protest. That is far more important than our Saturday chats, I suppose. Anyways, that doesn't mean I shouldn't keep talking about what I came on here to talk about tonight. Maybe they'll pick it up when they get home. So, the law of aesthetics, stated as a law, is thou shalt groove. And that is the most important aspect of existence, really. This is the most important thing. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to find your place in the reality that has been given to you. And if you don't, you're not going to exist in that reality in your current state much longer. But also, understanding this idea that everything moves with patterns and cycles, that this is what causes synchronicity, it gives us that chance at salvation, at free will. This gives us the chance to go beyond the obvious answers. This is how free will is achieved. You talk about the idea of I forget their name, but the idea of free will is they compared it to a wagon pulling a goat on a rope behind it. But even in this scenario, the goat has a lot more choices than one would immediately realize. Hey, Kenneth, how are you doing? Glad to see you. We're talking about the law of aesthetics tonight, which is first stated as living is an art form that takes place between life and death. And also, Len stated more fully as thou shalt groove. And thou shalt groove means you have to learn to adapt to the reality that you were given. And this makes it a self enforcing law in that we have to adapt to what is around us, or we will not continue to exist much longer in that form. So, this is the one actual law of the universe. But this is what also gives us our leeway to actually claim the possession of free will, in that when we interact, we choose how we interact. And I was just talking about Descartes comparing existence to a goat being pulled behind a wagon on a rope. Now, even in that scenario, if you think about it fully, the goat has some choices. He can choose what part of the road he walks on, where he steps exactly. And there's that tug of fate of the rope, but there's also the free will of how you respond to that tug. And that is exactly where we get it. That's exactly where free will is. Because there is a pattern that surrounds us at all times. There is a tendency, there's a momentum and positioning of where we are. There are the things that are available to us, the things that are not, what is going on in our world, the things we know about, and the things we don't know about that are affecting us. But the more we understand those things, goat could chew the rope. Indeed. All the goat needs to do is speed up enough to make some slacking and get the rope between his teeth and chew right through it. And that we can get that far to where we have severed that line. And then, even then, yeah, the goat still has to respond to where he is once he's chewed a hole in that rope. For one thing, the person driving might notice immediately and turn around and try to catch the goat, but also he's on a road. He's got a bit of rope left on his neck. He maybe, depending on where he chewed the rope off, it depends on where he is at, but he still has to adapt to the situation that he finds himself in once he chews that rope. Okay. Um, let's see here. So that's, but it is in that pool that proves free will. The fact that we are aware of the pull on our neck, even if we chew through the rope. Yeah. The fact that the goat is aware of the rope is pulling him is what proves he has choices in how to respond. And that's exactly where fate and free will exist. It's not a question of is it fate or is it free will? It is the interaction between the two that controls how we move. We have to learn to groove with fate in order to have free will. We have to learn to recognize the patterns and consistencies of patterns that operate around us before we can there I go stuttering. We have to learn to recognize those patterns before we can fully choose how to respond to them. We can choose respond at any time, but to really be able to figure out how to chew through the rope. Yeah, that's in the metaphor we're working with. You've got the goat pulling on the rope or getting pulled on by the rope. And he realizes at some point that if he sped up, he could get some slack and reach down and get his teeth onto the rope. Or however the goat figures out to get a hold of the rope and chew through. He has to first understand the pull and where it is directing him so that he can break that rope. So he has to find the groove of it. Has to understand how it is functioning, and then he can chew through once he figures out how to get a hold of it. And we absolutely seem to be able to completely randomize our fate if we take extreme enough actions. But then we have to decide where we're headed for ourselves, which I suppose is what we're after. Is to not be led by that rope, but rather to choose our own fate. But that also depends on where the rope was leading us. Because it may be that that rope was taking us to greener pastures. Can be that rope is leading us to slaughter. So that's the interesting bit about this idea of following one's fate. Fate is not always a good thing. There are things in fate that we, however, cannot avoid. As in where we are right now is part of our fate. And some of the things tied to that can be particularly strong. Um, there is in the Old English concept, and some of these words work Old English. Either way, there used to be a concept of doomed. In the modern concept, we hear the word doomed and we think, oh, bad, always bad. Doom is falling into ruin. What doomed was originally was the things within your fate that you just can't avoid. There's that continuation of patterns that's going to draw you into certain things. And maybe we can break those? Do you think we can use sigils and servitors to alter our fate? Oh, absolutely. Yes, we absolutely can alter our fate. The more doomed we are to something, the harder it is going to be to break that. But even doom can be damned. Um, damned and doomed are pretty much the same word originally. But anyways, yes. Um, that is a big part of how all magic works is by weaving within our fate. Like said in the previous episode, that's what sorcerer means is one who weaves fate. And using spellcraft, sigils and or servitors is one of the most direct ways to do such a thing. Sigils especially because we are creating symbols. We are creating artistic expression of self to place momentum on particular aspects of a pattern and push that forward and create whatever it is that we have put into our original intent of that sigil. So, yes, every time we use a sigil, we are weaving within our fate. Every time we do any kind of magic, that's part of what we are doing is affecting our fate. And that's something that is necessary in order to have free will. We have to get control of our fate. We have to, one way or another, get control of that rope that is pulling us down the road. Now, depending on where that rope is leading, as I said, we don't necessarily want to break that rope, but we do want to make ourselves comfortable with it and find the most pleasurable way to continue forward. I mean, in that metaphor, once you're thinking of getting pulled by a rope by your neck at the front of a cart, it's hard to imagine it being pleasurable. So there's where the metaphor kind of breaks down. But the goat could be being led to green pastures to, you know, be a stud goat for a dairy farm. It could be the best thing possible. But there's where the divination comes in, right? That's part of why we want to do divination and that type of thing is to not to weave our fate, but to see where our fate is currently headed and whether or not we want to alter what is coming to pass. Now, with servitors in particular, like I say, any spellcraft we are that we do to ourselves, we are in some ways altering our fate. Yes, it is in some ways a pretty awful metaphor because fate is not necessarily fated to be a bad thing. But as I was saying, with the servitors, that is in some ways less direct, but that means it can actually be stronger. Because a servitor, if you push it out far enough from yourself, is an outside influence. And if we go back to that awful metaphor of the goat, an outside influence would be the quickest way to cut that rope because you're directly influenced by it. Sorry. Anyways, the rope is a good metaphor because an outside influence, like a servitor, where a servitor can become an outside influence because it is projecting some of yourself into a separate being and then having that being affect your fate or whatever it is you're having effect. But in this case, it's having it affect your fate. And it can have a different angle towards the issue, which can actually be more potent in certain uh, cases. If it's something that you are particularly doomed to do, an outside influence is more likely to be able to take that away. Because when you are doomed to do something, that means that your nature is drawing you forward to that conclusion. So it would need to be something outside of you that would prevent that doom. If I can't see or hear my servitor, yet it means I haven't spent enough time on it. Um, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Servitors specifically. Now, a servitor is typically a being that has very little form beyond a sigil or something like that. So, I mean, I use servitors all the time, but I don't necessarily see or hear them. A servitor is typically a very short lived being that is, you create a sigil for its core, but rather than just using the sigil as a statement of intent, you create a sigil that is the core form for a servitor to perform a task. Most of the time, I don't see or hear those. Um, a tulpa is more of an imaginary being or imaginary friend. Sorry. It is something that you want to visualize as many details as possible. And just because you have to actually actively visualize those details every time does not mean that the tulpa isn't working. Yeah. It is a work. You have to put the effort in of imagining it being these things. You want to get as detailed as possible with the tulpa. You want to imagine every aspect of it, but to actively imagine it is how you create it. So even if after you have it doing things, if you still have to actively imagine its behavior and actively imagine seeing it in your mind rather than it just appearing in your mind when you think about it, that even that does not necessarily mean it's not working. Just keep going, keep working. When you are doing this active imagination, you are helping create the tulpa, you are helping create its behavior, you are helping to make it groove. You're repeating patterns within it. You are teaching it how to be. So the more longer you do this and the more you focus on that, the more powerful the tulpa is going to become. And ideally, yes, eventually the tulpa should be able to sometimes at least come to you completely unbidden and you will still see it in your mind's eye. But this is a work over time. This isn't something that's going to happen immediately. The exception to this being if it's one that is supposed to alert you to something, then you should be able to see it in your mind's eye when it needs to alert you to the thing. Or you should feel something because that's part of its process. Could a servitor become a tulpa by being imagined enough? Absolutely. In fact, I was just about to bring up one of my favorite created beings of my own, and that's Manatelyu. He started out as kind of a servitor in that he's a messenger spirit. So there is that him supposed to appear anytime need to be alerted because man, I tell you. Yeah. He was supposed to tell me anytime someone came near my tent. At the time, I was living in a tent. I was 18 years old and decided to wander around the world and well, experience what it was like to live in a tent out in Florida there. Anyways, I wanted something to let me know if anyone got near my tent. So I came up with this little dude called Man I Tell You, who would tell me if anyone got near my tent. And I visualized him every day and actively imagined him setting up watch at my tent when I left to go do stuff. Now, fortunately, no one ever messed with my tent, so I didn't have him in that aspect. But I visualized him doing the same thing over and over again. And because at first he was simply just a man, I tell you, he was kind of a servitor, but verging on tulpa, especially with every imagining, I would start to visualize him more intently. I would more, yeah, I would more actively imagine him, and each time that created him a little bit more. And so over time, he went from a servitor to a tulpa, and he kind of filling in some of the details on his own. And that's not necessarily a good thing when a spirit starts filling in details on its own, but it can be. The form that I imagined the first time was just a young Native American runner who would come run and tell me that that someone had been at my tent. Like just a messenger boy. And over time, with the imaginings, he's actually even grown up. But I imagined him more and more, and it became stronger and stronger. And eventually, he did very much get to where I could see him and communicate without actively imagining what he was doing. And it was at that point that he began taking on more roles. Because obviously you can't actively imagine someone giving you a full message because, well, now you're just talking to yourself. If it needs to tell you about something beyond, hey, there's somebody there, it needs to be able to create its own part of the dialogue. Yes. When you write characters, they tend to fill themselves in after not very long. Yes, that's exactly it. The more I imagined him, stuff that I didn't come up with on my own, he filled in those details on his own eventually. Is it better to have specialized servitors or general servitors? I feel that I like to start with a generalized thing. Like I said, was saying with Manatellu, it the other bit's going to start filling in. One that is particular, anyone that is particularly powerful in its thing, and you keep using over and over again, is going to kind of start to fill out on its own. And once it starts doing that, you want to start trying to fill in some of them details. That active imagination can be important because when it fills in a lot of the details on its own, they're not necessarily what you want them to be. That being said, it does tend to be more powerful when it has some sense of self violation. It starts perceiving itself. Once it's perceived itself, well, now you've created an actual being. Now you've created something that one day you're going to be interacting with it, the all thing, when we all get outside of the now and the perpetual in that perpetual moment. But, anyways, because once you perceive, you never leave. But either way, then you do have to consider its rights as an individual being. But it becomes more powerful at that point, and it will begin filling in its own details. And with Manatellu, I took him from servitor to Tulpa, and eventually filling in his own details. He actually kind of requested that take him all the way to an egregore. So at that point, I used the bottle method, and with some outside seeds and life force outside of myself, managed to bring him up into a fuller being. And he got very powerful from there, and to the point that other people could see him. I might as well, since we're continuing with the story, I'm going to keep going with this just a little bit, and then I will get back to a little bit more to your question about specialized servitors versus general servitors. So, with self awareness comes a soul. Yes. With self awareness becomes you're one of the ones perceivings. You're one of the ones perceiving. And we can get to that in a moment as well. But so from the bottle egregore, he was very visible. In fact, he got to the point where if people put the bottle up to up to their head, other people could see him and describe what he looked like without me having told them. By this point, he was oddly green in color, but he looked essentially like a Native American man in his early 20s with the mohawk and the whole thing. He's got a little loincloth. And he was quite powerful in that aspect. In fact, one of the people that I think maybe couldn't see Manatellu, I handed them the bottle. They put it up to their head. He took it away and said, "He's a sick, strange, twisted little man." And when he did, that was the first time Manatellu did something that was a bit concerning, in that there was a burnt out glass jar candle. So an empty glass jar sitting on the side of my altar, and it actually flew across the room and smacked against the wall right next to the dude's head. And I assume that was Manatellu objecting to being told such a thing, and he ran out of the room. My friend did, not Manatellu. He ran out of the room last time the dude ever came to my house. Anyways, from there, um, Manatellu once again actually asked to be put into a better form. He wanted to be made into like a marionette. Well, this first time he asked for a little doll that I could carry around, and I actually kind of failed the first time. I opened up the jar, I tried to do the whole thing, and the Manatellu was just kind of gone, and I didn't see him for a long time. Even when I visualized him, he didn't quite form. Something went wrong. But as I said, once something's become self aware, it exists. So it was actually years later I learned how to make a marionette, and I think I just needed to give him a better form. Finally, I made a marionette of him. And that's when Manatellu fully came back, as I would now call him a golem, because he has a form that is um that resembles his astral form. And that first marionette of him has the loincloth, that's the hair, and it looked very much like him. like how I would see him in my mind's eye. And so from there, we've actually had a couple different marionettes, and he's done quite a few different things. But back to your question originally about can a servitor become a tulpa? Yes. And this is the way that we get the most powerful created beings is by evolving them upwards, allowing them to fill in for themselves some of the details, starting with something that is just a part of you extended out, pulling that, giving that a form. And once it has a full form that you have had active imagination in and it has a good foundation, waiting until then to introduce outside life force and creating it into a fuller being. And like I said, I went from a bottle egregore and then eventually to a marionette. If you go from the when you go from the bottle to the marionette or doll, you want to make sure you have a form that is going to be sufficiently strong enough, because I wound up with a several year delay by simply not having a powerful enough vessel for him to be in, something that was close enough to what he looked like. Originally, I just made this little copper stick figure essentially, and it wasn't enough. Anyways, like I said, I was going to get back to that about is it better to have specialized servitors or general servitors? Um, if you are going to evolve it into something, I honestly think it's better to start with a specialized servitor. That seems counterintuitive, but that gives it that first task to understand. That gives it a momentum. That gives it a few wins of understanding how to do this thing, and then you can branch it out into other things. Now, if you don't want it to go any farther and you want just to have a servitor that is a general servitor to respond to something, like especially a replicating servitor is good to have one that is general use in that it responds to whatever it is that causes it to replicate, then that's still specific. But then after that, have a general response about what it needs to do. Okay, I'm not making sense there. That didn't make sense. That was not phrased correctly at all. If you're going to have a servitor that you're not going to evolve any farther, and it is going to be one that is doing heavy duty, doing a lot of duties, you're going to want to start it out as a general servitor. Now, in the terminology, like I was saying, a servitor tends to be a one time task sort of being. So you're more looking for a tulpa, really, with the general tasks. But you can, if you're not going to evolve it into anything else, it is just fine to start it out with a general being that can take on many different tasks and uh, confine your work with it to creating it itself, giving it its image, giving it its purpose, especially where you're just starting out. This is probably the best place to start out is with a general tulpa, a being that you imagine. You might want to give it a sigil, which you can make from its name. You are definitely going to want to give it a name. Yeah. You want to give this being a name, and it should be a name that has aesthetic appeal to it, and in some way maybe even defines what it is the being does. Like with the being I mentioned earlier, Manatellu, my messenger spirit, man, I tell you, he was going to come tell me stuff. And I was amused by the idea of smushing it together. And it sounds like a word that even, well, it sounds like a Native American language. It just sounds like something that could be said in Ojibwe. So, you know, I liked it. It amused me. It sounds like the kind of word that I might have been taught, but it's not a real word. You know, it sounds kind of like Manitou or something like that. Anyways, it's enough about my autism. So, man, I tell you, whatever grooves you, this is whatever amuses you with the name of this idea, and whatever you think the name of something should be, that's going to be your general use servitor. And then you want to pick the name and focus mostly on what he does, his appearance. You want to think about what he does when he's not helping you. And this is how you develop that being. Yeah. You want to picture his name, what he does, her name, their name, whatever gender you want to pick with that. And you want to have reasons to interact with it on a regular basis. So have a reason to daily focus on this thing. Now you're going to want to do that, but it's easier to do that focusing on it daily if you come up with a reason, excuse me, so that it's not just maintaining self-discipline, but rather there's a purpose. This is twofold. Number one, it's easier to remember to do if you've got a reason to do it. And second, do focusing on this servitor or tulpa that is going to be helping you simply to help it is not the momentum that you're looking for. You want to be having it do tasks. Think of some task that you want it to start with, and that'll be a task that you have it do every day. But because it's a general use tulpa, you want to make sure that you're often adding other tasks. I mean, really, there's not a very strong distinction there. Because, like I said, you can have something focus on one task until it gets so good at it that you can then open it up to other tasks. And that's how I did it with Manatelia, because originally a messenger spirit, but at this point, he's done a lot of different things for me over the years. Also, one of my oldest spirits. I'm well, I'll be 47 in not much longer, like less than a month at this point, and I've had Manatelia since I was 18 years old. I went off on one of my first wandering walkabouts, and that's how I wound up in a position where I needed someone to tell me if anyone was messing with my tent, because I decided to wander off all the way to Florida and go hang out in the swamps. Lots of other fun stories about that particular episode, but that's a very off topic of what we've gotten to discussing at this point tonight. Um, let's see. I hope I made that fairly clear what I was saying there. That is, in my opinion, an important aspect of it is making an actual practical task for the tulpa, because you're going to want to start with an imaginary being. You can give it a sigil. I mean, these words, tulpa, servitor, golem, egregore, they are placeholders. Yeah. They're not important except for in the ability for us to be able to talk shop with one another. Other than that, you don't want to let those labels box you in as to what you can and cannot create. But whatever you want to call the being, you want to start with one that you have given a name. And from that name, I would suggest making a sigil, because this adds cohesion. And then from there, visualize as many aspects of it as you can with each time you ask it to do a task. Um, if you're living in a space where you feel like there might be an energetic problem with your room, give it a daily task of purifying the altar room or your room. If you have you live in an apartment and you're having a lot of trouble with neighbors making noise, start with that. And it's not guaranteed that a servitor, tulpa, whatever, is going to be immediately going to be able to shut the people next door up, but it will work over time. And then making noise will remind you to invoke the being and visualize it and send it on its task to discourage them from making so much noise. But if you do go with that one, make sure that you have specified that it cannot harm the occupants unless you're okay with that. I would suggest, especially if you're new to this type of magic, not doing anything where it's going to be harming the your neighbors, because there's so many random repercussions that can happen from that and blowbacks if you're not paying attention, especially where you're having a being do it. So have them do it and like give them that caveat would be my advice, or whatever it is that you need. Like in my case, I was essentially a wandering homeless 18-year-old at the time. So anytime I left the tent, I'd be like, okay, man, I tell you, set up your watch and let me know if anybody comes near my tent. Fortunately, nobody ever did while I was gone. At least that they had a chance to tell me before someone else. Like I said, I have some interesting stories from that time period. My first walkabout way back in the day. Um yeah, so what else? What else do I have to say about creating your first created being? Like I said, I would give it a sigil, I would give it a name. Be very particular to make sure you think about what it does when it's not working for you. Visualize as many details as possible. It's going to fill in the ones you don't. And so you want to be mindful about what details it has a chance to fill in. But like I said, it is ideal to let it fill in some of those details on its own so that it can be allowed to get that sense of perception of self, because that's what's going to make it more powerful. That's what's going to make it more useful. But at the same time, that is also what is going to make it a little more unpredictable. And ultimately, that is what's going to give it rights. So at that point, you have to treat it a little better. I know that's a strange concept that a being created in your mind one is now a separate being, but once it becomes something that has perception, once it becomes self-aware, it is something that, yes, is connected to you, but it is now its own thing as well. And even if you sever that link from yourself, eventually it will come around again. It will continue to exist. Okay. Um, what else? What else do we have to say? I think that's pretty much it about the created beings. Bringing that back to the original topic at hand. Like I said, you're going to want to pick a name that you can visualize being what the type of tasks that you expect it to perform. Because even if it is a general being, you've got an idea somewhere in your mind. There's some aesthetic flow of what something like that would look like. And you want to match and mesh with that as best as possible. Like the reason I used the little Native American boy as Manatellu when it first started was because that's something that has been talked a lot about in my childhood, especially with the messenger boys and the running and how that related to Jim Thorpe and athletics. And there was a lot of things in my childhood about that and about, well, the Native American traditions and how that connected. So there was a lot of aesthetic flow. There was a lot of groove to that being. It grooved with me. It had that correct momentum and poetry within it for me to be able to see it properly. And ideally, if you can start with a being like that from the beginning, there's a special poetry to the first being that you create as well. That if you can allow that one to get all the way up, that has its own momentum, its own poetry. But so does the 10,000th one being a success has a poetry to it as well in some ways. So, man, to tell you was not my first grade being. Oh, hello, Black Unigriffin. Glad to see you on here. Glad you made it. Hope you're having a good night. We're just we've veered off topic a bit in some ways. We've mostly been talking the last little while about created beings like servitors and tulpas and the best way for those to work. You were doing your art stuff. Well, that is good. As I said in the last video, that is the most important thing, is to live, is to have expression of the self, to have an to exist with an artistic my tongue is tripping over itself. To live with an artistic flair, to have self-expression with the way that you interact with reality. Excellent. Um yeah, there's quite a bit in here that is worth a rewatch, especially this last bit about tulpas and egregores. And well, like I said there, really, I feel like the categories are only important in helping us to talk shop. Other than that, we should not be limited by these categories in how we create beings to help us. We should rather make sure that they flow within our concept of what a being like that should be. Because that, especially when we're starting with tulpas or something that is connected to the self so directly, we are we need it to flow within our mind, to have a cohesion with our own consciousness so that we can create that creature in a way that we desire. We want it to manifest in a way that is manageable. And so we want to come up with something that really connects with who we are. Hopefully that made sense, that they should groove with what we are in order for them to really coalesce, to really condense into a form. And then, like I said, if it's something that you want to maintain, you want to give it at least one task that you are doing daily. Good. I'm glad it made sense. You want, and like I said, you want to give it at least one task that you do daily, because um that keeps you working with it. That keeps you creating it, because every time you work with it, you are giving active imagination towards its creation, and that is what creates it. So we don't have to worry about it, any creatures we created, not immediately popping into our mind the second we think of it and having to actively imagine it each time, because each act of active imagination uh, creates cohesion to the creation process and helps it coalesce around itself and become more. Each time we imagine it, we are making it. Each time we visualize what it is, we are bringing it closer to being. And eventually it will pop. Eventually it will be something that we see in our minds. But just because we are actively imagining it does not mean it is not activating, does not mean it is not taking action. Okay. So, um it's getting to about that 1 hour mark where I have to take a brief intermission. That will be just a moment. Thank you for being patient with me. Here I am back again. Now, I would like to kind of draw us back to the original topic for the night and talk about the law of aesthetics again from the top. See if there's any. Sorry about that. Have been drinking. Imagine that really transferred over through the mic. Anyways, okay. So, as I was saying, living is an art form that takes place between life and death. That is how I usually talk about the law of aesthetics. And there's a lot of philosophical implications to that. That's an important part of it. And we're going to go over that a little more in depth than we have previously in the episode. Um, it is this beauty that draws the attention of our fuller selves, draws our focus to this particular life. So that is the beginning of this is the more artistic we can exist, the more we express ourselves, the more we create beauty with our movements, the more we are going to find ourselves, find our fuller selves drawn to this moment. And that is what gives us more ability to affect. That is what gives us extra charge, extra momentum to our motion in the first place, through our movements. But also, living is an art form, and this creates a poetry of patterns in everything that occurs. This is why magic works, because there are cycles and repetitions of patterns within all things and a momentum of how things occur. And whether we use sigils, servitors, whether we use high magic, low magic, what we are doing is affecting the movement of those patterns. That is how we sow fate, is by weaving within the web that causes each moment to manifest. And we do this with symbolism, metaphor. We do this with all kinds of different ways, but that's what we are doing. We are weaving our own artistry into the pattern of a moment and creating our own poetry within it. And so in order to do that, we need to have that understanding of the patterns that are repeating themselves in within that which we are moving. Now, that again feel like got a bit twisted around. So let me try to simplify that a bit. With that, what I am talking about is the idea that whatever it is you are trying to affect, you want to get an understanding of the patterns and repetitions around it, what momentum it has, and work within that. For example, if you are casting a, let's see, let me, I immediately ran into some examples that I feel like most of you aren't going to really identify with. So let's say we are casting a spell for employment. All of us have to find jobs at some point or another, so that's something to easily to identify with. If you are casting a job to find employment and you've found a job that is working with well, let's say trying to get a job with a landscaping company, and you've decided you're going to cast a spell to help you get this job with the landscaping company. You're going to want to pattern the spell towards not just getting a job, but towards the getting a job with the landscaping company. If you're someone that's going to be planting a particular type of flower, then you're going to want to incorporate seeds of that flower into the casting. If you're going to be cutting trees, you want to like commune with the trees and get their permission to be one of the ones to prune their branches, and just get yourself into the flow of what it is that is going in to the thing that you are casting. The more you can customize your casting towards the tell that you are trying to tell, the more it's going to have effect, the more it's going to groove with what it is that you were trying to do. You want to find the groove of the thing you were trying to affect. You want to find its flow and work within that flow and get that momentum to move forward in the way that you wish it to manifest, rather than to actually try and just change the will, try and turn the flow and direct it off in some other way. That is going to be more difficult. And that's why thou shalt groove. Yeah. In this particular context, thou shalt groove turns out to be, as I've said many times on this live already, the one law of the universe that actually enforces itself. But this is another place where it comes in. You have to be in the flow of what's going on to have a higher effect on what is happening. So you move forward in a way that matches the magic you were trying to create. And another example of this is if you are casting spells on a person. Typically, the way to work with that is if they are someone that works magic, using the type of spell work that they are familiar with, using something that replicates and repeats the same patterns that they themselves have been using to manifest results, because that's the pattern and flow style around them that has gotten them to concede that magic works. This is how things have affected them in the future. This is how things have affected them in the past. And so it is the easiest route of how to get things to affect them in the future. We're going to add just soda this time, slow down a little bit because I feel like I'm starting to slur my words just a bit there. We're just going to add ginger ale this time and not whiskey. Okay. So then we go from there to the idea. Well, actually, I guess we've already gotten past the idea that all things move within patterns, and is with understanding those patterns that we find power. And connecting to the poetry of a moment is how we connect with that moment. This is how we bring things forward, is by finding the poetry in the patterns and connecting with that poetry to affect those patterns and manifest our desires. Okay, so now I want to get back to that idea of thou shalt groove being one of the only self enforcing law in the universe. This is the only actual law, thou shalt groove, in that we have to adapt to that which is around us in order to be able to interact with it. We have to find a way to interact with the things around us in a way that allows us to continue forward, or we will not be continuing forward in our present form. And that just goes back to everything we've talked about before. But this is literally the one law of the universe, because we have to adapt. We have to find ways to interact, or else we will not continue to exist in our current form. Eventually, we find our way through. Eventually, we find a way to groove, all of us. But this is how it is. This is where it all comes to be. This is why I say bright blessings and an interesting fate, because it is that interesting fate that causes us to pay attention to ourselves. This is how we draw our fuller selves. And the more we, again, live artistically, the more we have an interesting life, the more we really get into the patterns and style and synchronicities within our own existence, the more power we have over our own existence, the more we fall in love with life, the more of a life we are going to have. And sometimes it can be very difficult, this idea of falling in love with life, because life can be a bastard. Life can be tough. Life can be hard. But that is the external. That is the things that we need to learn to adapt to. These are the things we need to learn to groove around. Sometimes the beat gets real wild and we have to find the way to dance that isn't the way we necessarily preferred, but it is the way forward so that we can get to those points where we can push forward to what we prefer. That was a really weird metaphor. I see myself dancing on like this checkerboard dance floor when I said that. It was, anyways. Um, my point here is that we want to live with that self-expression. We want to live in a way that we find interesting. That is why I say bright blessings and an interesting fate, because having that interesting fate, having a existence that you find interesting, that makes you want to experience life, that makes you want to know, makes you want to see what will come next, is the key. We want to keep that curiosity. We want to keep that artistic expression of the self and go forward with that. We want to make the world poetic. We want to make a place for ourselves that we can appreciate. And life can be a bastard. Like I said, sometimes life can be real rough and hard, and we're coming up on one of those patches. That is the hand we were dealt. But if fate, if we want to look at life as a card game, fate is the hand that we were dealt. Free will is how we play the cards. And it's not as simple as a game of poker. These cards play differently. Each card means something different every moment. Each card means something different every time a turn is played. I suppose where the metaphor kind of breaks down some. I guess more like a game of spades than a game of poker, or perhaps euchre. Anyways, um, let's see. What else do we have to say? Um, there is again. I want to repeat that idea that going forward, the loss of aesthetics is also how we create cohesion of the self. In that, not only is the higher self, fuller self, paying more attention to this particular moment of existence, if you living an interesting life, but the more beautiful your life is, the more interesting your life is, the more memorable the moments of your life are, the easier they are to remember in the next life. And this is an important aspect of how we create that cohesion. I do strongly recommend creating a personal sigil to help create that form, that central core. But even more importantly than that, really, is simply creating moments worthy of memory. Something that when you carry past this life and into the next is something that is worth carrying. Sadly, this is why we have trauma memories a lot. Like I said, a lot of my first memory will be that moment of death because trauma sometimes help. Trauma interests us even though we don't want it to. So often, it tends to cling as well. So if I'm hoping to change my fate towards something like an animation career, which is what I've been meditating on, and it's kind of shifting in that direction, what would you recommend to incorporate into a spell of sorts for that? Um, your animation characters. Create a servitor of one of the characters that you yourself have animated. And you can even tie its own fate of becoming something that exists to helping you get forward into that career. That is at least what I think of immediately is create a character that you groove with, one that feels connected to you, and have it help you become the person and put yourself in the position that allows that character to come into being. I'm glad you like the idea. Um, like I said, that's the thing that first came to my mind. I think it is a quite potential of an idea. Yes, Grant Morrison and his hyper sigils, very much like that. Can we invoke mythical entities to get effective results? Absolutely. In fact, this is a very powerful method because I was talking about that momentum, that act of active imagination. When we're talking about mythical beings, you're not the only one that is engaged in that active imagination. And this is whether it is a being that is conceded by all to be fiction or a being that is within the mythology and is questioned whether they were real or not, or maybe even we know they were real, but they were exaggerated. You can get the exaggerated version by invoking that myth. But also, you can get entirely fictional beings. I have successfully summoned both Gandalf and Bugs Bunny. Of the two, I found Bugs Bunny to be the more powerful. And I think that's because there's so many children that were actively imagining Bugs Bunny, and they don't have a psychic sensor yet when they're little. They don't have something telling them. A lot of these kids, when they were real small, watching Bugs Bunny on the TV back in the day, they were too young to understand he wasn't real, even. So there's a lot of power there. He can be a very useful entity to invoke. Gandalf, I have successfully invoked Gandalf, but I haven't had him do anything. So I can't say how powerful he actually is in use. But Bugs Bunny, and that's not nearly a mythical character. Neither one of those are exactly mythical characters. But the point is, yes, you can very much invoke mythical beings, even if they didn't exist at all. Now, if there we were a being that actually existed, there is a free will connected to that. Like a being like Bugs Bunny, that's not a fully self-aware thing. It's a fictional character people have made up, and as long as you can work within his archetype for the thing you want him to do, it can work pretty powerfully. Now, if you're dealing with something, if you're summoning a mythological figure that actually existed. If you work with the myth and you work within the things that the person would do within the mythology, then you're working most likely with something that isn't self aware. Same rules apply. But if you are working with um, the actual being behind that, that can get quite complicated. So, mythological being, yes. The being behind a mythological person, more complicated. More complicated. So, depends on if you're going necromancy or mythology as far as that one goes. But for the most part, yes. And like I said, you can even invoke fictional beings to quite the effect. Um, let's see. I'm really glad that you like that idea. Uh, like you and a Griffin. I, if you do create such a character, I would love to get some kind of an update on that somehow. Maybe you can tell us about it in a later chat. So, like Indra or Odin, um, they're more on the edge of did they or did they didn't exist than we often realize. But for the most part, absolutely, you could invoke Odin. And as long as you are working within the system of how we understand Odin, yes, you can definitely invoke Odin and get results. The thing about Odin, though, is like I said, you're going to be. There's a lot of people that have believed a lot of stuff at Odin if he's not real, and he's self aware if he's not. But either way, he's a trickster being. That's one of the things people often forget about Odin. He is a bit of a trickster, but he does have a lot of knowledge to impart. And you have to be willing sometimes to accept that knowledge. You can even, in some ways, well, he's certainly not a being that is averse to the idea of sacrifice. But a lot of times, that sacrifice comes more when working with Odin, that some of the knowledge you receive are things you'd maybe rather not know. Good. People tend to think of him as something else simply because he is the head of a pantheon of gods. And like, oh, trickster can't be the head of a pantheon, but he's far from the only uh, head of a pantheon that's a trickster. Okay, so um, let's see. Are there any updates that I want to give for this week? Um, I am still trying to find a open source copy for the Liber Null, but I do want to start going live on Wednesdays for book clubs. I will, like I said, I will post more about that when I have a clearer idea. I can't guarantee it's going to be this Wednesday that we start because I don't have as clear of an idea as to what I'm doing as I did originally. Okay. Any other updates? I think that's it as far as updates go. We're going to be talking more about reincarnation soon. And that's actually could have segued into that when I was talking about the thing with trauma, because that is the other thing that tends to cling is trauma. Most of my past lives, the first thing that I remember is my own death. That is almost always the very first thing I remember. And so we have this trauma, and it can actually be utilized. Past life trauma is a way to access past lives, but it's also something that we need to be able to deal with if we start remembering those lives, but even if we don't, because it can cause stuff in this life that we're not even aware of how. It's There are things about it that will affect the groove of the moment, and we're not aware of the deep lore, the deep twist of the thread that is affecting this moment. Have I done any recent spells? Um, well, let's see. I have a lot of ongoing work. Most of it is of a self-interested nature, like pertaining to my spousal sponsorship up here in Canada. There was the money magic spell that half manifested recently. 'Cause I've been working for quite a while on creating or on manifesting a lottery ticket with a frog on it. I was hoping to then win said lottery, but after working on that for quite a while, there actually has been a lottery ticket that appeared out here with a frog on it. And it was very apt on the nose because part of what I'm doing elsewise is the trying to become Canadian, and it's actually a Canadian frog. It's a frog with a little Canadian hat on it. I thought maybe I had one out here. Just a moment. Okay, so there's not a Canadian hat on him, but it says Canada right there. And that's the other thing I'm working on elsewise is stuff with me getting the permanent residence here in Canada. And I mean, I haven't won the $50,000 of the lottery ticket, but the lottery ticket did manifest. It has appeared, and it's even kind of connected to the other thing I've been working on. And we've about broken even on these particular lottery tickets, which is definitely above the average. You know, you're not supposed to be breaking even buying scratchy tickets. A took is a very Canadian yes, but well, we don't call them tooks in the United States. We call them beanie caps. Though I feel like he's wearing. Though I feel like that's not a took or a beanie cap. I think that's like a long pointy hat, and we're just seeing the front of it. See what it is there? I could be wrong. Not sure entirely what kind of hat he has. Yes, it's getting close. I'm getting close to my manifestation, and I will be calling them tooks as a Canadian. Yeah, you've already got me in the habit of calling them tooks. It's true. It is. It is true. Yes, it means that we're getting close. Though often, once you get a full result, that's kind of what you're gonna get. So I probably need to work on another thing. Like I got close, but I got an actual manifestation. So that's going to kind of release the threads of it. But I'm continuing to play these frog tickets until there's no more of these frog tickets. I've been thinking actually about doing a second layer to the spell. And I haven't decided exactly what to do there yet, or if I'm going to buy one and just not scratch it and use that as like a trigger for the next. magical money style working that I cast. I find casting spells and servitors to be more straightforward than the law of assumption. Indeed. Indeed. The law of assumption, and I assume you're talking there about the idea of just behaving as if it already is, and that getting things to occur. There I don't it doesn't have all the necessary steps. Like, it can work. Yeah, that idea of law of attraction and the idea that simply believing something is going to happen will make it happen. Now there is some truth to that. Like I say with the law of perceptions, belief imparts reality, but it's imparts, not creates. You need more than that. It can be enough, but it's not but it's only one small step. Once you create a spell, you've got your belief in there because you wouldn't cast the spell if you didn't believe in it. So you've already got your assumption. You've got a magical form, which is able to be used as a symbol to affect the movement of patterns, which you then charge to give them momentum, and then you release it into the collective consciousness, out into the weird, the whatever word you want to use for it, the man, the place where it all gets weaved and manifested into a moment. So there's several more steps, and it's a lot more cohesive when you are casting spells or using servitors, which has a lot of the same um, aspects. So the it is definitely more powerful than the law of assumption because it's got a lot more cohesion and aspects. I like Silva method, flow dreaming, and various techniques from Vadim Zealand's reality transurfing concepts like this plate technique and other ones. But I also light candles and meditate. Yeah, I've read about the Silva method and the flow dreaming. A lot of times, I actually, um, well, it's not always by choice, but I will often cast in my sleep, and that does seem to have a very powerful effect. Like a lot of times, I will wake up and tell Felix that I dreamed about this, and I consider myself to be doing a lot of my heavy and most important work in my sleep. I'm after going to have to do another intermission. Be back in just a moment. Okay, I'm back, and I hope everyone's been enjoying the microphone. Hopefully, this has worked out better for the sound quality. I'm gonna try and get one of them little mics to put in front of me as soon as I can, because I don't really care for the ear things. Honestly, I've been trying to avoid this, but um, I was noticing the sound quality on the last live, and I was like, "Oh, I'm real echoey." It's like I would imagine that wasn't pleasant for the rest of you. So it's better that my ears suffer than yours. So we'll go with the headset till I find something better. Okay. So let's see. Um, I am actually getting quite close to the 2 hour mark. That's usually when I call it off for the night. Are there any questions about this or chaos magic in general that any of you would like to ask, or about sorcery in any form, really? I did have another client today, but again, it was someone that didn't. We actually did do a video, but it was a private video. I won't be sharing that. So we don't have any divinations for the night. In chaos magic, can we use AI to help cast spells? Um, I mean, there are certainly people that are trying. There are certainly people that are doing things that with AI to do spellcraft. And I mean, everything is necessary for a thought. You have energy moving through the magnetic sphere for what they are doing to be a thought. So, yes, um, AI can be used for chaos magic. I have no experience with it myself, so I can't really go into a greater depth with that than that with it. But yes, it can be done. It makes total sense to me that it could be done, and there are people that are doing it. I saw you made a sigil to place with Ellis. How did you come about that? Me and the Ellis sigil. That is a long story. It started clear back with do I have one on the wall there? Okay. When I very first got into chaos magic, I had this idea of this connection to all of these other loners through some idea, through some connection on the astral. And I called it um, off and on either Loner Society or the Society of One. And rather than the LS of the Loners Society, which would be the linking sigil and with the same concept, I actually went with the S1, Society of One. And when I was 16 years old, I was drawing this all over the school. And I also found myself finding a way to connect back to. In the last episode, I talked about the moment that I died in the operating table when I was a kid. And I was found myself on the edge of the nothing. When I was 16, through using cherry flavored cigarettes, I managed to get myself back into that moment. Now, I know that sounds weird, but the anesthesia that OD'd me was cherry flavored anesthesia. And then later on, with the use of cherry flavored cigarettes, inhaling cherry flavored vapors, I was able to mentally get myself back to that moment, back to that place. And when I was there, I used that same sigil, the S1. It's an S with a 1, looks very similar to the Ellis sigil. And I connected back to that place by marking it with that sigil, and also was considering it as connecting myself to all these other people. So from there, I began using it in a lot of different ways, and I actually first got connected to the beings that I call the Horde through that sigil on the edge of the nothing. And then from there began filling out a larger connection, but they are very similar sigils. Anyways, when I first saw the LS sigil, the linking sigil, which is used as a way to connect a bunch of different people through different areas of chaos magic, and also as a means of charging sigils and connecting to spaces where they tag the LS sigil, I immediately understood that connection between the two sigils. And from then on, I've been working with both of these sigils and have actually done a lot of work on it. If you go through my channel, there was a lot of stuff that I did combining those two sigils and working with Ryan Lloyd, the original creator of the linking sigil, or at least he claims to be, and I've seen plenty of evidence to that case, where we are combining the two and working with them, and it combined in a lot of different ways. In fact, the video for tonight, although it the thumbnail, it's this. Oh, trying to point to something on the screen that's on my wall. Hold on. The sigil there, you may have noticed that's the same one for the thumbnail from tonight. Even though it looks significantly like my minion sigil, is actually worked from the LS and the S1 at one point. Nope. There's a whole evolution. You'd have to watch all the videos. It's a bit more than I can explain here. But we connected those together, and how it turned out is the S1 sigil was coming down from the astral plane while the linking sigil was going to the physical plane up, and we connected them through the veil, and they're part of how we created the larger opening that we've been working on since that connection was fully established, and we created the bridge and opened a door between the astral and the physical planes, and are trying to use that was one of the steps we have taken to help re um refined balance, create a proper balance between the spheres on this plane. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with me in the Ellis, or linking sigil, but I have come at it from the position of the S1, or sigil that I had personally created, that looks a lot like and is linked to the Ellis. There's a bunch of other stuff. The Ellis is an incredibly unique sigil. Meditating on it, for me, like meditating on the Ellis, was like grabbing onto a live wire, while the S1 sigil is a connection of webbing. Um, if I had one up, actually, let's see here. I have ways to share video. I have where to share videos. Let's get a picture of the S1 up. Where'd it go? Okay. Got a bunch of them here somewhere. Ah, here we are. No, not in there. Let's open it in open with it's at least a little better. Okay. So let's see. Go over here now. I haven't done this for a while, so that's the S1 sigil there. I'm sure you can immediately tell how it's similar to the Ellis. And then there's been a bunch of evolutions of this. First with the LS being used to connect the top to the bottom of the S1 there. And yeah, there's a whole lot going on there. Anyways, it'd be easier to just do this actually. I have a video on that that I will link in the chat. Oh, no, let's go this way. Playlist. And then filter by title S1. Videos, and then there's one where I'm specifically talking about it. Where is the one I'm looking for? There's the S's, so I've already done it by then. Ah, here we are. This is the one. Okay. Is mine more masculine or feminine? Well, the Ellis is typically seen as female, as at least Ellis when she is manifested as a being. That they tend to speak of Ellis as a woman. So most people prefer think of Ellis as feminine. I've never really considered the S1 being gendered because it doesn't have that particular aspect to it. It's not really a servitor connected sigil. It's just the S1. When I was working with it, and I believe I talk about it in that video, I actually had a dream that Ellis was involved in, and it was definitely a feminine being. Okay, so let's see here. What else? We've covered most of the things that I wanted to talk about with the law of aesthetics. I still am open to questions about chaos magic or sorcery. If anyone else has anything to ask, I've got a little more whiskey here I can go through. I think I can handle it. Been making them a little strong tonight. Oh, did I miss a question? Oh, from the Romestead about doing their reading next week? Absolutely, we can do your reading next week. Oh, my opinion on Solomonic seals. The seals are in my opinion, sigils that have been around a very long time. That is essentially what anything like that is sigils with a lot of active imagination and momentum placed into them. Uh, Personally, as far as the Solomonic seals and Solomon and that type of thing go, I don't really like to work with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. They definitely work. There is definitely power in there. There's a lot of belief behind that stuff. But there's also a lot of connotations involved with that, with a sense of hierarchy and forcing of spirits. And for me, that's a no go. I do work with some of the beings that are talked about in the Goetia, but I don't work with them in a forceful manner. I don't put a crown on my head and do all this, do all those things. I develop rapport with spirits. I develop trust. I develop a sense of understanding and open communication, and I work from that aspect. And because the Seals of Solomon come at it from a very different way, I tend not to use them simply because it might damage that sense of rapport that I have with beings that may have been traumatized by uh, people that use those kinds of sigils. So, in order to establish rapport with those beings, I avoid symbols of those who work with those beings in a less cooperative manner, is the way to put that. Okay. And you were saying the first time I did something with Ellis, I wrote it on the back of a receipt that purchased my notebook and placed it inside the book that was my shifting journal to shift to a different reality. Oh, cool. Then I went to sleep with it under my pillow and a dream of dancing painted cows, and this big cow plopped on top of me and crushed me awake. That is pretty funny. I mean, that's the thing about the Ellis. It is a trickster thing. There's a lot of silliness. There's a lot of playful in there, but there's also, I mentioned about people tagging it. Indeed, astral anarchy. That if you're talking about connecting the sigils and how with the S1 and the Loner Society or linking sigil, that is exactly the idea behind the Astral Anarchy Alliance. Um, but as I was saying about the LS sigil, it is linked to a bunch of different things. Like people purposely connected it to all kinds of stuff. And some of it's real useful and amazing and awesome, but people also put it in the most absurd and bizarre and shocking sometimes places that they could. So that's the thing about the LS is it's everywhere. Honestly, when I work with it myself, I tend to use a filter sigil of some kind when I'm working with just the raw Ellis because it's been in so many different things. I like to have something to keep it at bay a little. And what I mean by a filter sigil is some addition to the sigil to prevent things that would be against my working from linking to the sigil, like adding perhaps an extra dot off to the side of the L sigil. You know how it's the L and the S, and then it's got that little dot on the side over there. Adding a second one or changing the location of the dot or something like that. Just some slight alteration that is a filter within the sigil. Okay, so at least finish this drink before we call it, anyways. Going a little bit over the 2 hours already, but that's all right. Um, this whole thing I was talking about with living your life as an art form and the law of aesthetics. I mean, maybe it's because my name is Art, but it has always been, at least for me, one of the guiding principles of my existence. Even before I understood why, even before I understood this idea of drawing the attention of one's fuller self and entertaining the audience of the all thing. Um, I've always felt like this is this is the purpose for being. is self-expression, is expressing oneself, giving forward your will and moving your will into your reality, expressing yourself by the way that you live. To me, this is at the very least, the escape from the existential crisis. Because maybe in the end, the nihilists are right and nothing matters. But that means we get to pick what matters. There was, I posted in CMG recently the opposite of what people usually say, the nothing is true, everything is permitted. Instead, I posted everything is true, nothing is permitted. And what I meant by that is that we don't, or everything is true, nothing is permitted. And what I meant by that is that who's the one doing the permitted? There is no permission. We can do what we want. We do have to live with the consequences of our actions, but we do not require permission to act. We do not need words outside of categories. Like what I was saying earlier about the servitors, tulpas, egregores, golems, etc. These categories are important only in that they give us something to talk shop about. What is important on top of that to remember is that they are not permission. We do not need permission to mix the two. We do not need permission, for example, to do use AI. My suggestion really there is, well, fuck around and find out. But people seem to be having a strong effect, a lot of result with using the AI. So yeah, it can work. What's the difference between a sorcerer, chaos magician, and a witch warlock? Ah, more of this idea of categories. But these are again important categories. I'm not trying to be it's so that we can understand each other. Um, in my opinion, a sorcerer is someone who, like I said, the literal definition of the word is someone who sows fate. And in my expression of the word and how we define it in the Sorcerers Guild is that a sorcerer uses a method of, well, fuck around and find out. They are someone that experiments and finds out what works for them and uses that information to fill in or adjust their paradigm, learning over time through experience what is and what is not real. Now, this is different. I didn't quote that word for word from the Sorcerer's Guild definition, but that is what it is. A sorcerer is someone who sows fate. And part of that, in order to properly do that, you need to be able to put aside the idea of identity. You need to be able to put aside the idea of, well, this is how a sorcerer does it as opposed to a witch or a warlock or etc. And simply find out what works through experimentation and understand that no matter what, there is no defined law of how magic works. It works a little bit different for every person because each one of us is the center of existence. And existence radiates out from us and our perception. So reality reacts differently from our point and perspective than it does from another person's point and perspective as them being the center of the universe. So a sorcerer needs to understand that in order to sow fate, we must understand the weaving of fate and that it is different for each person, and we have to do so from our own position within reality. And so a sorcerer is someone who weaves fate by understanding their position within the web, while a chaos magician is someone who changes their perception and belief to alter their fate. A witch is much harder to define. I've got an entire episode on what a witch is. To me, a witch is someone who is born differently. But a witchcraft can also be defined as anyone who practices witchcraft, which is essentially magic, and it can evolve and change depending on where you get the idea of a witch from. And then we of course we get the idea of Wicca. But then my and Wicca being witches, but really Wicca or Wiccan means wise one. This was more closely related to a secret society around herbalism. Most of your people that were actually Wiccan with the original meaning of the word was a secret society around herbalism where they exchanged knowledge about what plants were used for what thing, and they were midwives and things like that. They were healers, and that's what your Wiccans were. Well, a witch, at least in the traditional sense of the word, is someone who is born under unusual circumstances and is connected to magic in a way that is unlike others. Um, that's where we get the idea of the witch's mark, person born with six fingers, and this is a concept that transcends European culture. Often we think of the word as witch as being European, but there were people in Africa that would kill their twins out of fear they were being a witch. There were people in Hungary that gave these people ex- um, special consideration and raised them up as a Taltos, which is essentially the same word, means the same thing as witch. Everywhere around the world, we have this idea of people that are born differently being different. And some cultures respond to this in fear, some respond to it with joy and reverence. But either way, it is not because they all were afraid that these people were part of a European paganism tradition. It's because they were different, they were strange. And warlock, when we get to that one, to me, and my understanding of what a warlock is a word that I was taught through a coven of that practice Welsh cunning, which is one of your forms of witchcraft. Witchcraft is a European tradition that has a couple different types, but Welsh cunning is one a particular type of it. And that's the type that they were actually teaching me, though they never actually used those words. They told me that a warlock is someone who has broken their oath. A lot of people think of the word warlock as simply a male witch. And honestly, it's just a word, in my opinion. In Welsh cunning, like if you're talking to people that are Welsh cunning, you don't want to walk up to them people and tell them you're a warlock because they're going to think you're an oath breaker. They're going to think you are someone that during the burning times helped the Inquisition find other witches in exchange to keep themselves from being burned, is essentially what I was told that word meant. But other people believe it just means a male witch and all kinds of different stuff. I it's been so many things as to actually completely have lost its value of definition at this point. And the word is kind of up for grabs as for what you want it to mean, in my opinion. But it does usually have a strong masculine connotation. Um, okay. Let's see if you have any other questions. And like I said, now is a good time to ask them. We are actually getting a lot of people on right now. That's kind of interesting. Getting towards the end of it, and also now all kinds of people showing up. Um, let's see. There are a lot of common questions. So if you're a woman, you can call yourself Seven. I Hello, Three Foxes. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Zencat. But greeting, Three Foxes. Glad to see you here. A wizard. So if you're a woman, you can call yourself a wizard. Oh, absolutely. These words do not, like I was saying before, about we do not really need permission, but especially the word wizard. A woman can, there's no reason a woman can't be a wizard. There's no reason a man can't be a witch. These things just became gendered over time. A wizard is another, just another one of them words. It just means a person who wields wisdom. And a sorcerer is someone who weaves fate. And they are not necessarily gendered. I call myself a sorcerer, and I don't think that anyone who's feminine needs to call themselves a sorceress. They are they are it's an unimportant, it's basically it's an unimportant detail. One's gender is simply a matter of how they were born this time. Unless of course you identify, I mean, I don't mean to say that there aren't people whose souls are different gender than their bodies, because you definitely develop preferences over time. Indeed. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, Black Unigriffin. There's nothing wrong with a woman calling themselves a wizard. There's nothing wrong with a man calling themselves a witch. Um, yeah, it's not even necessarily that distinction made in all cultures. Like, ideally, the word that I would actually use for myself, if I thought people would understand it, is the word handed down to me, which is Manitou. And it means mystery, but also means essentially sorcerer, or if you want to say shaman. But it's a word that does not have a gender of any kind. Anyone can be a mystery. Do I think that Ellis could have an effect if it was placed on a location in a way that was not visible, as if it was like buried, for instance? This is a great question, Romstead. Um, and yes, absolutely. In fact, a lot of the early tags of the Ellis sigil were done in exactly that way. A lot of times people would put them in places where they would use invisible ink, lemon juice. There's a whole lot of tags done that way, or just done in ways that they knew they were going to be washed away soon. It's not about the leaving the symbol so much as it is the placing of the symbol. I actually have to do the intermission once again, but I will be right back. I have been drinking quite a bit. Be right back. Okay, I use both witch and wizard sometimes. That's a very good point, Three Foxes. They said, I use both witch and wizard sometimes. I'm a woman. I don't feel married to either label, but the words serve their purposes in certain contexts. That's exactly it. Um, an important part of this, at least to me, is to not get married to any particular word. It's the same as I was saying a little while ago about categories of created beings only mattering in the idea of being able to talk shop. Like there might be words about how you do your practice that would be useful if you're talking to someone else, so that you can understand so we can both understand where the other person is coming from. But we should not then put ourselves actually in a box around that just so we can say we are this or that, whether it's gender, no matter what it is. These boxes are not something we should be limiting ourselves with. We should be limiting ourselves only by that which is us, that which resonates with us, that which works for us. Not this is what I do as a witch or a sorcerer, chaos, or a santo, or any of it. Yeah. In order to get that full self, in order to get as far as we can to the all thing, close as we can to the all thing, we want to consider all things. Okay, so I feel like I missed the question here. I answered Rumstead's question about the Ellis. And yes, it can be used in many different places. Like I said, it's the act of placing it, not the it staying there afterwards. That is the important part. But if it stays there, that's all for the better. Okay. How can we recall past lives and between lives? Um, I've been doing a few videos on that. Um, the thing I find the most potent is actually sense memory, as in have being in a similar position or state to that you were in a past life. Uh, Oddly enough, I originally didn't want to believe in reincarnation myself. A lot of that has to do with past life trauma, uh, me wanting to avoid certain recollections. But well, I was smoking with my uncle the first time I had a past life memory, and it was about being a hippie, being who was in a similar state of mind at that time. So I'm not certainly not trying to uh, condone or endorse any substances, though I don't think the particular one I'm talking about is any worse than coffee. Um, but it anytime, I mean, just things that you suspect you might have done, activities you think you might have done in past lives, try to do those things again. And as far as the remembering in between lives, um, get yourself cohesive in that astral state, which begins, like I was mentioning earlier, about a personal sigil. You create a personal sigil, and from that personal sigil, use that as the core to also create a dream platform, or however you want to create a dream platform. That particular part is actually mostly about that platform. I recommend creating it off of your personal sigil. Not everybody does it that way. But what I mean by a dream platform is a space where you return from one dream to a next. That gives you a moment of cohesion, a place to be. And that can branch out. Once it's there, it can transcend time and begin affecting dreams of past lives. Yeah, so that it's kind of it can wind up being to where it's kind of always been there, even if you only actually create it now, because that moment of creation is outside of it. So, how that works out is once you've created that cohesion of being in that place, you can start remembering what it was like, what it's like. in between lives, because the dream platform isn't just somewhere you go in dreams, it is somewhere you will then start going in between lives. And once you remember what it's like to be there, then you can start recalling what has happened to you there. Though often when you're trying to recall in between lives, you're more wanting to know not what's happened there, but that first bit. And to understand that, what it's like in between lives, the key to that is lucid dreaming. Because once you understand what it's like to be self aware in a dream, that's what the afterlife is. That's what it's like in between lives. And there's lots of different places, there's lots of different dreams, but that's the key. That's what it all has in um, common. So the key to knowing what it's like after you die is to understand what it's like to have a lucid dream, because they are the same thing. And like I said, you can get drawn into patterns. We talked about that some in the previous live about what it's like in between lives. We actually, I believe, got into that quite a bit in the idea of you can get drawn in to other people's cycles. That's why it's important to um, have that ability, that lucid dreaming, that creating a dream platform, is so that when you do lose contact with the body in a full context, you know what's going on and you know what to do. And if you know what's going on and you know what to do in that moment, then you can be more better prepared for your next life after that and get that cohesion of memory. But also, you can be more in control of what happens to you in the meantime. If you don't have that, you've got a bunch of people around you talking about Christian stuff, you could wind up s- being stuck in that idea, in that concept for a minute until you finally get fully a hold of yourself and be like, what the heck am I doing here? 'Cause even those people, though, eventually reincarnate. The people that get drawn into those heaven things. It's not as permanent as it's sold to be. We all come back eventually or go somewhere. Especially now that we've actually managed to bridge this reality back to the fuller reality, then if you die and are fully in control of your own experiences, you can go to the S1 sigil and from there, through that bridge, fully escape this particular manifestation of reality, which, I mean, I think a lot of people would like to do that. Me, I'm interested in to see what's going to happen here from this point forward, so I'm sticking around still. Good. I'm glad to hear that. At least that I always like to hear when people concur with my own experiences, because that is how we build consensus. I'm also open to hearing people that don't concur with me. By the way, that is something that it's part of the reason I've always had the hesitance with teaching and talking about the things that I've learned, is that I don't like that dynamic where one person says what is and everyone else listens. Yeah, that's not a good dynamic for the guy saying what is, because now nobody's going to disagree with him. He's not going to find out when he's wrong. And then he can't grow. And then he can't continue. And as much as I would really like for this channel to grow and become something huge, it's not my end goal. My end goal is to grow and experience and understand. And so that's what's always made me hesitant about doing this kind of thing, about the idea of teaching people in the first place, is because I want you to tell me no if I'm wrong. And you might not do that if you see me as a teacher. Is this bridge a real thing? And you've been dreaming about someone trying to show you the bridge. Yes. I believe wholeheartedly that there has been a bridge created from this reality back to the fuller reality of the interconnected. Essentially, I believe there is a fuller multiverse in which all of us are already have our fuller selves connected to that. We, this particular aspect of ourselves, is in a smaller subsection of that got kind of pinched off when we all tried to manifest in this reality, and the person that opened up the gates for that then tried to essentially create a hostage situation. Oh, it's very hard to explain, especially in this video. But essentially, we are in a closed part of reality because one of the people agreeing to help this part manifest decided to try to cheat us and tried to pull us into an area where we can't remember, and we lose cohesion so that they can get us to think they are higher than us. But yes, this bridges, we got rid of those, and we are now opening up this part of reality to the fuller manifestations of reality. And this is a bridge out into the multiverse. So, yes, that very much sounds like he found his way out. That after he died, he found that bridge. Well, it's not escaping reincarnation. It's escaping reincarnating in this manifestation of reality because we exist within a multiverse. And if one doesn't want to reincarnate, there are ways to delay that process. But eventually, we're going to find somewhere where we want to do it because we are talking about an infinite multitude of options, which our particular aspects of our fuller selves have this aspect of us has been trapped in this portion of reality for quite a while now. So, wanting to leave here is perfectly reasonable. But you're still going to wind up manifesting in a different material plane somewhere else eventually. But on that one, I definitely could be wrong. Just to be clear, like I said, I don't know if I'm wrong or right about everything. It is those who speak with complete confidence that one should be concerned about, in my opinion. I tell you as much as I can possibly know. Yeah, a lot of people find this reality horrible, and it's because, like I said, they've tried to get us to be closed off here, to get us to conform to the idea that there is a hierarchy, that there is someone who is greater than us, and there are other places we can be. So I don't blame you that at the end of this one, you might want to try to manifest in a different material realm. Um, Me, I so we are here to help. Yes, Zen Cat. That's kind of me. I'm here to. I guess I'm stubborn. I like a fight. I'm not done with this reality yet. I'm gonna make this reality something real cool within the next 10 lifetimes. This place is gonna rock. Next couple lifetimes might be a bit rough. I won't lie about it. The next couple lifetimes might be a bit rough, but it'll get cool. It'll get fun. Gonna be a rough ride for a bit, but that's the interesting part sometimes. This is stuff that the audience will enjoy. Indeed. Indeed. We can actually, the way it works, manifest we wind up manifesting in a material plane that is that we ourselves were the ones that started it. There's pocket dimensions and all kinds of different stuff that we can do. all kinds of different ways we can exist. Right now, we're in this one. We have to groove while we can, groove what we can while we can, have the experiences that we can have. Because there's also the possibility that I am off my rocker, right? There's also the possibility that I've that I am incorrect. And that is what I was talking about in the last one, that, you know, it's like Pascal's gambit about whether you should be a Christian or not, but this is a more logical one. What happens if I'm wrong? Well, you lived your life beautifully and artistically for no reason. What other reason is there? Because if I'm wrong, then there's still just there's just nihilism. If I'm wrong, then there is no meaning. And the only meaning, and if we go right back to that, is the only meaning you can have is the one that you created. And that's all I'm trying to say. So if I'm wrong, I'm still right. That we need to be live beautiful lives and experience existence in a passionate way. Because even if I'm wrong and it's all just nihilism, absurdism is the only answer to nihilism. And all I'm telling you to do is express yourself with your existence. And Bob Dobbs, indeed. You know, not the only reason I smoke a pipe, but certainly got a kick out of Bob Dobbs for that immediately, because I've always smoked pipes. Excuse me, sorry. Okay. This live got off to kind of a slow start, but make sure I'm pouring the right ones. Okay, here's the one. Okay. Well, that'll have to be the end of that. So, let's see. Um since I've decided to pour some more, I guess we're going to keep going for a bit. Uh, what else do we have to talk about in this general area? As I was saying, absurdism is the only answer to nihilism, and you know we have this aspect of blind faith. I've talked about blind faith before, and what we're all looking for that with that blind faith, especially, is a preventative for cognitive dissonance, for the idea where our brain no longer knows how to put the narrative together, because we tend to find this unpleasant when we experience that particular moment in time where we don't understand. Personally, I find confusion intoxicating in some ways. I guess you could say I enjoy cognitive dissonance. But that is the thing we are typically trying to avoid with this idea of blind faith. And so this is a way to circumvent that. In the episode about blind faith, I talked about putting it onto fairies. Like, I choose to believe in fairies no matter what. And that helps some. Yeah, it gives a vent to that. But when we do it this way, This gives this connection to the fuller self. That gives us a chance to put our blind faith in the idea that we have free will. The one thing that we know is of true thing. And when we put, and by the what I mean, I didn't make a lot of sense. Let me get through that one more time. We can have when we believe in a fuller self, and when we believe that the purpose of existence is the expression of the self, of living artistically, then that gives us the ability to put our blind faith into the beauty of our own works, into the beauty of our existence. This gives us the ability to believe that no matter what, our existence has value. Now, as long as we don't allow that to become a narcissistic thing, as long as we don't allow ourselves to get to a point where we think our existence has value above that of others, this is power. This is beautiful. This is what arts are all about. This is what artistic expression is all about. But we also need to understand that we need to leave room for other people to make their art. We need to interact with other people's art. We need to interact with the beauty of other people's existence and create beauty together, create community, create communal beauty, create a flow and poetry with those with which we interact, to find those people what make us um what's the word I'm looking for here? Because I'm not talking about finding the perfect lover. Yeah. I'm talking about community. I'm talking about the idea of being able to have those people around you that lift you up, that allow you to have inspiration of the self. People that will tell you the truth. To me, that's one of the most important things. People that will tell me when I'm wrong. That is part of the reason Felix and I work out so well together, is because they don't just accept what I'm saying as true, no matter how confidently I say it. And this is awesome, and it's one of the things I appreciate about them the very most, is I can trust that they're not going to just agree with me. Yes, my love. Um, yeah, like I said, that was a big part of the reason that I was real hesitant about starting this YouTube channel even in the first place. Because I don't want to create a dynamic where you all think that you're looking to me to understand how your magic works. I can help you understand these things, but it's just like with a painting. I know I've said this many times, but it's just like with a painting. I can teach you in some ways how to move the brush, but I cannot teach you how to paint. I can teach you the rules of what can help make a good painting, but you still have to find what is inside of you to make it, to control what the brush actually does. My metaphors are a bit off tonight, I think, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. I couldn't remember the proper way to phrase that. Like I said, I've said that many times with a better phrasing. Memory wasn't quite there tonight. The indica up here in BC is amazing. Okay, so we're gonna finish this one at least. Yeah, we've gone almost an hour over the usual time at this point. Took a while to get going, but I feel like I'm having a pretty good time at this point. Um, let's see. One of the original questions was spells I've been working on lately. There's Noctera that I talked about a while ago, and the work with Moist Critical and his court case. But I don't, unless he posts something about his court case, I don't know how to get results on that one unless I get some kind of information back. Typically, for most court cases, I would be working with Santissima Muerta, grandmother, because she is very effective at that type of working. That's one of them things where I usually very much just, um, you know, go seek out the professionals. But it isn't just his court case against customs and immigration of the United States that I'm trying to affect there. It's also about the me wanting to affect ICE customs, ICE or immigration and customs enforcement. So that's one of them things where there's a poetic license. Romstead asked way earlier about if poetry, if the poetic nature of what you're doing matters in a spell, and it very much can. And in this case, that's what I'm using as my in is, well, he did me a favor, uh, Moist Critical Penguin did, by making fun of me, and that's got me monetized as the channel. So now he's doing this court case, and me helping him is repayment, but also something to get me in to getting my having my in to affect that part of what's going on in the American political sphere and what I can do to well, melt the ice. Um yeah, there is let's see, what else do we have to talk about? Definitely gone, like I said, we've gone well over time. Is there any other questions we have? I think this is probably the last call for that. I am getting to the point of wanting to get off of here, I suppose. I mean, I might as well finish the drink. I'm not quite ready to go, I suppose, but we're getting there. Um, let's see. Other spell work that I've been doing lately. I've been doing some offerings for Aspharas, the cosmic rainbow serpent that is the egregore protector of the guild. We just draw mice for her. Um, that's kind of outside the realm of this channel for the most part, though. I mean, I think a lot of the viewers of this channel are also members of the Sorcerers Guild, and if you are not, it's just a group on Facebook that you're welcome to join. It's just the Sorcerers Guild. I suppose we're more than just a group on Facebook, or at least are at times. Oh, are you on Facebook? Here, let me get you a link. How do I? There's got to be a way to just copy the thing. Ah, yeah, like this. think that works. Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I get it. We I tried to actually import the Sorcerer's Guild off of Facebook, but I was too ambitious too early, and it didn't quite work out. But I would actually like to migrate the group from Facebook in some way in the future. Because yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of Facebook either. Honestly, I don't like that I get well. I get it. I tend to be one of them people that'll just scroll through the Facebook. I don't like that it I spend so much of the day with it influencing my thought patterns. But I do tend to be on there a lot. I can't deny it. But since we've been talking about it, I'll go ahead and put the link here anyways. Not that I'm trying to lure you back to Facebook or anything, because well, oh, is LiveJournal actually still around? I didn't realize LiveJournal was still around. I migrated from LiveJournal clear back when MySpace became a thing, and then when MySpace like stopped being a thing, I wound up on Facebook because that's where everyone had gone, and so that's where I am now. Well, I have a LiveJournal. Haven't been on there in a very long time. Not I don't think I'd be able to remember anything about it. Um, I technically have one still. I think maybe because I had a LiveJournal way back before MySpace was a thing. That's how long LiveJournal's been around. But I haven't. Like I said, I didn't know they even still existed. I'll look into that. If I have a LiveJournal, maybe I'll start going on it again. That was a very long time ago. Okay, I still have quite a bit of a drink left, but um yeah, I mean it was cool. Actually, I rather liked LiveJournal. I'll be right back one more time. We're going to do one more intermission. Okay. Yeah, LiveJournal was pretty cool. Actually, I was reluctant to leave LiveJournal, and then I was reluctant after that. I was reluctant to leave MySpace. So, you know, I suppose part of me is reluctant to leave Facebook, but and it's funny because usually I like new things, except for when it comes to the internet. I suppose a bit of a luddite, and not that I'm necessarily opposed to new things. I just I tend to be like, oh no, I won't know how to work it. Yeah, MySpace has gone through iterations where it was like all kinds of different stuff. It was like a music player thing for a bit there after it first went away. And I'd heard recently, yeah, that it's like back to being basically MySpace, but I haven't tried to get on there for a long time. Like last time I did, it, kind of my profile was there, but I couldn't actually do anything. IRC. I don't know if I remember what that one is. Another place I frequented a lot. It's actually where I got my early teeth cut my teeth in early chaos magic was the Yahoo chat rooms back in the day. And almost all of these places, MySpace, LiveJournal, all those, my handle was TRXTR. So like Trickster with no vowels. Yeah. Yeah, those were some crazy things going on in some of them Yahoo chat rooms back in the day. Absolute madness, some of the chaos magic stuff going on in those days. Yeah, we used to have those the booby trapped posts or comments like the idea was that if you actually just looked at the comment, you could be connected to the curse that was going on there. That was one of the biggest things. So that's where I first learned the idea of filtering. Because you had to you had to keep something across yourself between you and the actual energetic flow coming from the thread you were interacting with, or as you get bumped with all kinds of crazy, different crazy stuff. And then the magic dueling. The magic dueling was something I was really amused by back in the day. What you would do is you'd be on one of those threads in the Yahoo chat room, and you'd both agree that you were magic dueling, you and the other person in the thread, or whatever the hell they were called, right? The yeah thread, and you would keep tabs as just to what had happened in the other person's life, and they'd say what they were trying to do, and you would have to admit, obviously, the other person have to be honest that this or that had happened or not, and they would actually try and like find ways to prove that they had connected to the other person against their will through like dreams or something like that. It's called magic duelings. That was going on in a lot of the chaos magic circles. I suppose, I mean, honestly, there's incentive to even if even if you get hit, to be honest and tell the truth there, because still exciting that, hey, that guy managed to make me dream this crazy thing or something. It's still somebody manifested. So as long as everyone's in the spirit of it. But I don't like we don't have that going on in the Facebook group, Sorcerers Guild, because that can get way messy. And like I said, there's no way to verify the other people are telling the truth, and there's just so many variables. Anyways, um, let's see. Oh yeah, we did talk about starting that up in CMU. Oh, that's something that's an update. Um, I am very much considering starting a public CMU on Facebook, but I'm not sure this is pertinent to the YouTube channel. Well, I mean, it was in a consensual, experimental sort of way when we were doing it back in the Yahoo chat rooms. Typically, I mean, there were the booby trapped there were the booby trapped comments, but that was different than the dueling. The dueling, both people would agree that they were dueling and trying to get a certain thing to happen to the other person. And it was sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it was left a bit vague. But that's also where I first learned about um, Alexander Dugin was in the Yahoo chat rooms. That's how long that guy's been around, and now he's helping Putin over there in Russia. That's where he learned about Operation Mindfuck. Was in the Yahoo chat rooms. Well, I mean, he had just as much access to the books as the rest of us if he could speak. I'm sure he can speak English. You know, read English, and they have just as much access to the books as we do. And the internet. But certainly, I ran into him and or his acolytes in those Yahoo chat rooms back in the day. Anyways, yeah, I think that I'm gonna go ahead and call it for the night now. Unless there's any more questions anybody else has before I go, I do have a bit more of a drink here. If there's anything else anyone wants to ask, this is the last call. All right. I think we're going to call that for the night then. Bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.